What's good? It's Woog. I want to talk a little Weyes, who has just released her fifth full-length album called And in the Darkness, Hearts Aglow. Weyes is one of the better singer-songwriter contemporary indie-style singers, I would say, of the past, 5 to 10 years. It's interesting because she's got this very melancholy, longing, expressive style in her songwriting and in the accompaniment, the instrumentation to her songs. But it's interesting when you think that Weyes, whose real name is Natalie Merring, that she got her start musically doing kind of like a drone style of music where it's not quite like heavy metal, but it's got like these washed out guitars that kind of create for this droning ambient vibe. And it's kind of like noise rock, which is very, very different than what she would grow into as a singer-songwriter, taking on not only those melancholy vibes, but, if I was to sub-genre categorize it, I would classify it under Baroque pop, chamber pop, even a little bit of dream pop, and I would say some folk rock as well when you get into some of her, folky, more bouncy style songs, like on this latest album, which I love, by the way, and we're going to get to how good this album is or might even be, but like track 2, Children of the Empire, kind of has a 1-2-1-2 bouncy vibe, a little bit more folky than the chamber pop, baroque pop leanings of, say like the first 2 songs from Titanic Rising, which was her 2019 album. So this And in the Darkness, Hearts Aglow album is the follow-up to 2019's Titanic Rising, which kind of saw Weyes and her style kind of grow into a fever pitch in terms of how critically well received this Titanic Rising album from 2019 was. But yeah, those first 2 songs from 2019's Titanic Rising, a lot's gonna change. And Andromeda, those kind of have more of that Baroque pop, just that kind of swooning, kind of slower, somber vibes. So she's pretty versatile within her own lane, but it's usually a variance of those 2. I would say Baroque pop, chamber pop over here, then every now and then she'll get into something a little bouncier. Yes, she does have a couple folky songs per album as well, but vocally, it's interesting. Like you almost hear a progression of her vocal style over time, album by album. When there is no reverb on her vocals, like in the opener to this latest album, this new album, listen to the opening verse on It's Not Just Me, It's Everybody. When there is no reverb or no effect that kind of gives like a slight echo or a slight, it almost sounds like multiple vocals, which she does do that multiple vocal layering in some of the choruses. But when it's just stripped down to the raw vocal, she does sound a little bit like Carole King or even Karen Carpenter. I've heard both of those parallels mentioned before, but if you listen to some of Carole King's Tapestry album, you will hear some of that kind of warm vocal that Weyes Natalie Merring is showcasing on that album intro. It's Not Just Me, It's Everybody. But on that same song, by the time you get into the chorus, you do hear some more of the layered vocals, which kind of create for a dreamier and just more pillowy sound. But yeah, album by album, she really started to come into her own on that 3rd album. It was called Front Row Seat to Earth, and that was in October of 2016. And if you even listen to the opening on that album, you'll get a good idea of what I mean in terms of the versatility within her lane. And the album opener to that one is called Diary. And if you listen to the pacing or to the beat of that opener to the Front Row Seat to Earth, Diary, you'll hear that it's a 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 rather than a 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4. So yeah, it's not quite waltz like, but it's almost like the same. It's like a slowed down waltz where it's like 1 2 3 1 2, and again, that's just the opener. By the time on that Front Row Seat to Earth album you get to a song called Used to Be, that song Used to Be is kind of everything you need to know about what a good Weyes song sounds like. That was one of her best early songs. Still one of my favorite Weyes songs to this day, Used to Be, and it's from that same 3rd album from 2016. But yeah, the next album after that was Titanic Rising, and again, that's where she kind of hit the peak, at least thus far, of her critical acclaim. Like, The two ways that I look at albums in terms of how much critical praise that they're getting. I mean, it would be a mistake, in my opinion, to look at any one publication. Like some people will look at what Pitchfork says. Some people will look at what Rolling Stone or Spin or whoever, how they rate that album. But Metacritic is really the best gauge to go by because it aggregates all of the different publications and then it gives an average score based on taking from 50 different publications rather than if you go the Pitchfork route or something, you're just looking at one publication. So there are two ways to go about it, even with Metacritic's aggregation style. You could go with the raw scores. So basically when an album is released, you'll get all of the different publications saying, I give it a 10, I give it an 8. Metacritic will then kind of put that all together and say, okay, what is the average Metacritic score, right? So at the end of the year, that Titanic Rising album from Weyes Blood was the number 2 best rated album on Metacritic, meaning all the publications put together, if you average out the scores, Weyes Blood had the second best album of 2019. And it was only beaten by Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds' Ghost Teen album. That's a devastatingly sad album, but beautiful album, sad and beautiful album. But yeah, Weyes Blood Titanic Rising got number 2 if you're talking about the Metacritic aggregate score. Then the other way to look at it is at the end of every year, all the publications issue out their, best albums of 2021, 2022, 20 lists. And this might kind of parallel how they saw the albums right when they came out and gave it the score like the week of the album release. But at the end of the year, they'll kind of do a review and they won't base it necessarily on how they rank these albums. They'll just kind of almost independent of those scores basically say, this is just how we see the, ranking the best albums, almost as if they feel differently at the end of the year than they did when the album first came out. So using that metric, Metacritic also aggregates that, basically saying, okay, who had the most number 1 positions on these different publications' albums of the year lists, or who had the most number 2s, number 3s, and they basically see who came out on top when you aggregate all the critics' top 10 wrap up, best of year lists. And going by that, Titanic Rising was tied for number 6. So it's certainly, no matter how you basically do your review, it's one of the best albums of 2019. So that's the album that Weyes Blood was coming off, going into this new And in the Darkness, Hearts Aglow album. And by the way, going back to that Used to Be song from the album before Titanic Rising, if you listen to the opener, like those kind of organ sounding keys, like leading into the vocals, right? It sounds a little bit like progressive rock band, almost, early metal, Uriah Heep. They have a song on their Demons and Wizards album called Circle of Hands. Listen to Circle of Hands and listen to Used to Be and tell me if you see what I'm saying in terms of that, that organ sound. But yeah, looking at this new album, I think I like this one maybe as much as Titanic Rising. It's still early and I want some time to pass before I really settle into my feelings on this one. But upon first 3 listens, this is a very good album. And I like that she keeps it short too. This album had 10 songs. Titanic Rising had 10 songs. I like that. There's very little filler. You're kind of getting to the meat and potatoes of what you want to accomplish with the album within just a few or at least fewer songs than, if you were going to release an album with 16, 17 songs. It's just a lot more hit and miss in those situations. This one gets right to it. And just like on Titanic Rising, the first 2 to 3 songs on In the Darkness, Hearts Aglow album are fantastic. It's Not Just Me, It's Everybody, Children of the Empire, which might be my favorite song of the whole album, one of my favorite Weyes Blood songs to date, and Grapevine. That's a great 1, 2, 3 punch. Just like on Titanic Rising, A Lot's Gonna Change, Andromeda, another one of her best songs right there, and then Every Day, 3 great songs. And Every Day, that 3rd song on Titanic Rising, a little bit bouncier, similar to Children of the Empire, the track 2, and In the Darkness, Hearts Aglow album. So she does kind of mix up the slow and then get into a little bit of bouncy just to mix it up. Both of these albums sound very despondent, it's almost Armageddon, even if you're talking about relationships. Titanic Rising was almost mistakenly assumed to be a pandemic album, but it was recorded and released just before the pandemic. It was a 2019 album that just happened to be perfectly timed, and then by the time we got into the pandemic, it almost seems like that album reflects that or almost projects or forecasts that. It's very kind of weird. And unlike Titanic Rising, which again was before the pandemic, and In the Darkness, Hearts Aglow truly sounds like the pandemic album. I mean, she wrote this through the pandemic. She caught early COVID, and the way that kind of meshed with her relationship kind of falling apart and stuff, like she just documents these things very thoughtfully. And if you listen to the lyrics, a lot of that is expressed in terms of relationships, post relationships, just kind of getting a new shifted paradigm about yourself and about your self-worth and all these different philosophical, topics. She will express these things in pretty simple words, but it just makes it sophisticated in how she uses the simplicity of the words to describe complicated matters, and she just does it very well. And again, she uses like these very chamber pop, baroque pop, phrases or even words. Like on Children of the Empire, she uses the word labyrinth. Like that's just not. It sounds like it was from like a bygone era in the way that she describes some contemporary matters. And her vocals, I said Carole King, Karen Carpenter, but when you like listen to a song like Twin Flame, which is track 7 from the newest album, she sounds a little bit like Liz Fraser on the chorus. Liz Fraser is the vocalist from Cocteau Twins. So, and more specifically, I think that Weyes Blood on that Twin Flame song sounds like a Cocteau Twins song from the album Treasure. Not even Heaven or Las Vegas with Cherry Colored Funk, but I mean the Treasure album. That's the one I believe with like Lorelei or Loralee. But if you listen to the chorus of Twin Flame, yeah, the way that the vocal just kind of sounds like it's hitting that more alto, soprano-ish, the higher ranges, because she'll, sound a little bit bassy and heavy voice, but she could also hit the higher registers, and she does sound a little, Liz Fraser Cocteau Twin-ish when she does so. It's pretty pleasant to listen to. On the song Grapevine, man, that's just a sad-sounding song. The Grapevine is like this stretch when you're heading up the 5 freeway, leaving LA to, if you're going to drive to the Bay Area and you're going to take the 5, after you leave like the Magic Mountain, the Valley, San Fernando Valley area, you hit this Fort Tejon, Tejon area, and it's also known as the Grapevine. So your car slows down because you're going up these like big winding mountains. Sometimes they shut the whole thing down if the weather's bad, like right now towards the fall and winter. You start getting a lot more closures on the Grapevine. It can be a treacherous drive. You want to make sure that you don't run out of gas around that area. But yeah, the Grapevine, that's the name of her track 3. And if you listen to how she talks about the relationship, about how she used to drive, through the Grapevine with her lover, with her ex, she uses a very skillful way of, at the end of the song, basically saying, now we're just cars passing each other on the Grapevine. It's pretty sad. But yeah, the Grapevine, by the way, if you're driving again north through the Grapevine, you'll go through the Grapevine area, but then it flattens out around, I want to say like Fraser Park is like the name of the exit that you'll see, and there's also an exit that says Grapevine. So right around there, when you go from the darkness of the mountains, especially if it's early in the morning, like the mountains will be blocking everything from both sides of you, so you're just kind of driving this narrow path through these mega mountains. When you go through the exit and you leave that area, the land then flattens out as you descend from the mountain. And if you catch it in the right part of the morning, the way that the sunlight hits that wide expanse of land where you could see as far as the eye can see now, you're not in this enclosure because of the high mountains. It's all flat. The sun starts rising. I remember one time I was going through that and I was playing the Fleet Foxes song. It was either Ragged Wood or Tiger Mountain Peasant song, whichever one starts with the whoa, come down from the mountains, you have been gone. That song, like, it was just the perfect scenery and the perfect sounds to exiting the Grapevine. But yeah, that's one of the best songs as well on Weyes Blood's last album. But please let me know if you've heard this album already. Again, upon first couple of listens, I'm really digging this. I'm gonna give it some time before I say whether I like it as much or even perhaps more than Titanic Rising. I see that it's already getting a lot of critical love, which I kind of expected. I felt like if this one was even a good album, that it should receive pretty favorable reviews. Like, she just seems to be, she's pretty damn well respected among the music community right now, to where, yeah, it's just her time. And I would not be surprised if this album gets her nominated for like Best Alternative Music Album category, or perhaps maybe even just the Major Album of the Year category. Less likelihood that she makes the Major Album of the Year, but we'll see how well this one is received and whether she gets only genre-based Grammy nominated or is nominated for one of the major awards. I wonder if she's actually going to be considered a New Artist. Yeah, she hasn't been nominated yet for Best New Artist, so it's kind of weird. You don't necessarily have to be a new artist to be nominated for Best New Artist. It's almost like when you hit the major levels of the, closer to the mainstream where you've got way more visibility, then they might nominate you. So sometimes you see artists who've been around for like 5, 8, even 10 years nominated for Best New Artist if they just had something break in a way that their past work just hadn't, brought them into those higher exposure levels. So we'll see if she's nominated for Best New Artist. Also, one of the songs on this last album, God Turned Me Into a Flower, she actually sounds a little bit like Enya on that song. And I don't mean that Sail Away song, that Orinoco flow. I think that's Sail Away, Sail Away, Sail Away. Not that version of Enya, but the same Enya, same artist. But when she does kind of the more melancholy and less enchanting, less beach house-y sounding songs, when she gets more into a melancholy where it's a more somber tone, that version of Enya, I feel Natalie Merring, aka Weyes Blood, sounds like on the song God Turned Me Into a Flower. Very interesting sounds, very interesting album. Let me know what you think. Also, she's got an EP that kind of got buried and it's no longer even available on Spotify. It was with Ariel Pink, another very good artist who's kind of been canceled. He's had a couple things where he was like there on the day of the January 6th Storm the Capitol Day, although he said he just went back to his hotel. He said he just went for the rally itself and then basically just went to the hotel, didn't partake in any of the stuff, the illegal stuff and the Storm the Capitol stuff. But between that and how he was alleged to have treated his ex-girlfriend physically, emotionally, yeah, he's pretty much been on the outs in terms, he got dropped by his label, I believe. But yeah, that EP with Weyes Blood and Ariel Pink has since been removed from Spotify. But yeah, it was a few songs and it was pretty dang good. And it was sandwiched between Front Row Seat to Earth and Titanic Rising. So it was between 2016 and 2019 when Weyes Blood did the EP collab from that Myths series. Check those out with Ariel Pink. But yeah, let me know what you think about this latest album, And in the Darkness, Hearts Aglow. I really like Weyes Blood as an artist. This album definitely wasn't a failure to meet expectations after the spectacular Titanic Rising from 2019. Let me know which of those two albums you like most, and if there's an album prior from Weyes Blood that you like as much or even more than these latest two, let me know that as well. And also, what would you say are your 3 favorite Weyes Blood songs? Let me know in the comments. Like the video, subscribe to the channel if you love music like I do. I'm Woog. Thanks for tuning in.